My name is Bryce Matthews, and this is the Deep and Lonely Podcast presented to you by Houndsman XP. During this podcast, we will dive deep into what makes the ultimate, top-level, and unmatched extreme competition coon hunter. We will hear stories of old, tales of today, and we will dive deep into what separates the men from the boys. The stories will be raw, the truth will be told, and the camaraderie will be second to none. Pull up your chaps. It's about to get deep. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Deep and Lonely, presented to you by the Houndsman XP Podcast. Today, we are going south. We are going all the way down to Alexandria, Louisiana. We're going to make a pit stop at Crossroads Animal Emergency Clinic, and we're going to have ourselves an appointment with Dr. Bronk McDaniel. Bronk, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm not too bad. Guys, for those of you who've listened to the previous episodes of Deep and Lonely, you might recognize that name, Dr. Bronk McDaniel. If you listen to our episode we did with Dual Murphy, you might have caught in on that. Dual was in a bad wreck I guess it was last year, and Bronk happened to be the other person in that vehicle with Dual. So we're glad that both of them come out on the good side of that. We're glad to have both of them here. And Bronk, we are excited to have you sitting down with us today to talk a little bit about some veterinary topics as well as some competition hunting. So you ready to get this thing going?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, man, I'm excited about this. So guys,
me too.
Let's start this off. Farm store vaccinations. It's something that we've all done. We've all went to Tractor Supply. We've seen them in the cooler in the back. Are those farm store vaccinations the same as veterinary prescribed vaccinations, and do they have the same effectiveness?
The short answer to that is yes, they do. I guess the dilemma with the farm store vaccines is you got to make sure that they were stored correctly, shipped correctly, and then you take them home and give them correctly. And if all three of those things are done, then honestly, they're the same things that we use at the vet office. The negative side of that is you don't know how those vaccines were shipped to Tractor Supply or to the farm store, and you don't know how long it took them to put them in the refrigerator. You don't know what happened after they were in there. Did the power go out for 2 days? That is a negative. You don't know what happened. Now, once you buy them and as long as you take them home, you mix them up and you give them within that 30 minutes of being mixed, then they work the same way. But us as veterinarians, a lot of people think we just want to make money on it, and that's why we want people to do them through us. But to be honest with you, we really don't make much money on the vaccines. They charge a little bit more than what it costs them to buy it. But the vaccines and the puppy shots and all those kind of things are one of the least amount of money makers for a regular veterinarian. Now, I own an emergency vet hospital now, so I don't do any vaccines where I'm at now. But I owned a day clinic for a while before I sold out, and so I did a lot of vaccines there. So I know kind of all about that side. But I guess I tell people the biggest negative to farm store vaccines is the guarantee with it. If you come into my clinic and I give your dog vaccines at 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks, and 15 weeks old, like they're supposed to have, that is what the drug companies and vaccine companies require for your dog to be fully vaccinated is 4 sets every 3 weeks, starting at 6 weeks old. As long as you do that, a week after that 15-week set, so at 16 weeks old, they are considered to be fully vaccinated. And if that dog was to ever catch parvo, distemper, lepto, rabies, bordetella, any of the things that we vaccinate for, the drug company that does the vaccines, they actually will pay all treatment associated with that disease. So if your dog catches parvo at 18 weeks old and has to be hospitalized, most parvo treatments, $1,000 to $2,000. I mean, it's expensive. And that company will give a maximum, usually $2,000 to $3,000 is what they do to treat your dog for parvo. And so basically you will get your dog treated for parvo for free. Farm store vaccines, the companies don't recognize those as a guarantee because they were not given by a veterinarian, first off. And secondly, they don't know if they can trust that farm store to have stored them and put them up correctly. It gives a vet a bad name if all their vaccines go bad and their dogs get parvo. And so it's just one of those things where I tell people, look, if it's a dog that you really care about, or if it's a dog that's going to be expensive to you and worth some money, you're better off getting all that stuff done at a vet office so it's on file and you're protected and the dog's protected.
Is that protection nationwide? Is that all across the U.S.?
Yep, it is. Yep. Every vaccine company has a different guarantee, but majority of them are all the same. You know, after you do those vaccines, you have basically when that rabies is done, which is on that last set, usually 15 weeks old, 12 to 15 weeks old, one of those sets, you're required to do another one in a year. Now, depending on where you are in the nation, some clinics do every 3 years as far as a 7-in-1 after that first puppy set and the first year-old shot. After that, it'll go to every 3 years. And then some places, the rabies is every 3 years. Bordetella, which is kennel cough that most people know it as, it's an every year vaccine, you know, once a year. Where I'm at in Louisiana, we don't have a ton of rabies, cases, I would say. So it's actually, once you do the first two, it goes every 3 years. And where I'm at, the 7-in-1, 8-in-1, 5-in-1, whatever your clinic does, it's a once a year vaccine, because where I'm at, we're endemic with parvo and distemper and lepto and all those things. So it's an every year vaccine for the rest of their life. Now you can do titers on them when they get old. If you say, look, my dog's 10 years old, had vaccines every single year, I don't think he needs them anymore. Your vet can pull blood, send it out, and they run a titer on the dog's blood to say how protected that dog is from parvo and distemper and lepto and all that. So I have some of my owners that will do that as these dogs get older, because they don't want to put anything unneeded into the dog. The problem is the titers are expensive, and so you spend more money doing that than you do just going ahead and vaccinating the dog. So honestly, I tell people, don't mess with the titers unless you are one of these people that are against vaccines. I wouldn't mess with the titers. I would just do your rabies by law. You know, they got to have a rabies, and where I'm at, it's called parishes, where most people are as counties, but you got to go by the county law or the parish law. Where I'm at, it's once a year for the first 2 years, and then once every 3 years after that.
Houndsman XP Podcast Network is sponsored by onX. The most comprehensive mapping system in the world is available by going to onxmaps.com and downloading their app. Several subscription offers there. Highly recommend you using onX. And here's a true story for you. We've all got that spot where when we turn our hound loose at night, they're going to head that direction. Well, the other night, my hounds headed in a direction for that property that had recently sold. I had no idea who owned that property. I simply opened up my onX app, found the landowner information, cut the dogs off, and the next day I went to their house. And not only did I get permission to hunt there, I think I made some new friends. They are beef farmers, and they do not like raccoons running through the feed bunks, leaving their mess behind. Yeah. Go to onxmaps.com and download the app today. At checkout, make sure you use the promo code HXP20 and get 20% off. When you join us on Patreon, you will get a discount code for a deeper discount on onX Maps. Know where you stand with onX.
We've got a new pup, and we're going to go through and give it all of its vaccines. What are the vaccines that you're treating that pup for when they come into your clinic to ensure, they get the best start at life? Especially those guys running, running
So
hounds.
at 6 weeks old, at 6 weeks old, we do a 5-in-1. It's got like parvo, distemper, corona, and that kind of stuff in it. That's at 6 weeks. I'm sorry, not 5 weeks. That's at 6 weeks and 9 weeks. And then at 12 weeks and 15 weeks, we do, it's called an 8-in-1 or 9-in-1. It's got leptospirosis in it. Lepto is spread by rats, and we stopped vaccinating for years, and then Hurricane Katrina came through 15, 20 years ago, and we started seeing lepto cases again, so they kind of put it back into the rotation. But that's we call it a core vaccine. So 6 weeks and 9 weeks, they get a 5-in-1 or 4-in-1, whichever one your vet does, and then at 12 weeks and 15 weeks, they get a 7-in-1 or an 8-in-1. We do Bordetella, which is a kennel cough, and it kind of depends. They have an injectable version, they have an oral version, and they have an intranasal where it goes in the nose. Kind of depends on which one you do. Most clinics where I'm from does the intranasal one, and it's a one-time vaccine, and then it's once a year after that, so you don't have to booster it at all. Rabies, most clinics do at the 16-week or 15-week mark. Some clinics where I'm at does it at the 12-week mark, but they have to be at least 12 weeks old to have that rabies vaccine. And then it's once a year or once every 3 years after that. Now, rabies, the reason we do it at the clinic I owned for a while at 15 weeks is because we get a lot of stray puppies in, and we really didn't know their birthday. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a 12 weeks old and a 15-week-old puppy. So just to be safe and make sure that they're not 10 weeks old when we give them the rabies, we wait until that last set. And that also generally makes most owners come back for that last set. A lot of owners slack off after that second or third set and don't want to do that last set. So with them knowing they didn't get their rabies yet, they're more likely to come back for that last set if they hadn't had their rabies. I
got you. So one of the other things that I've been giving my dogs that my vet recommended was the distemper shot, since they're mainly going to be hunting raccoons, and then also a Lyme's shot to help prevent against the tick disease.
Yeah. So Lyme, that's what generally makes it a 9-in-1. Where I'm at, we don't have Lyme disease. But with me being in the hunting world, I've learned a lot about Lyme disease recently. I've got 3 dogs now, 3 hounds basically now. And, one of them, when I got him, he was positive for Lyme, Ehrlichia, and anaplasmosis. So he had everything because somebody wasn't taking care of him correctly, I guess. It's one of those deals where I'm at, we don't even carry Lyme vaccine. We special order it for somebody that travels to the East Coast or to the Midwest or something like that. But where I'm at, kind of Gulf Coast region, we really don't have Lyme disease here where I'm at. But with these hounds traveling all over the country, it's one of those vaccines that's normally it's either by itself or it's added in with the 8-in-1. And it's kind of the same deal. You do it twice. You do it at 12 weeks and 15 weeks usually to get it. It's not as good at protection as parvo and all those, so it's not a fail-proof method. I know dogs that have got Lyme vaccine and still got Lyme disease, but it's better than doing nothing for sure.
Yeah. So while we're on
distemper, that distemper is in the 5-in-1, 4-in-1, 7-in-1. That's one of the core vaccines. It's in all of those. So when I say 5-in-1 or 7-in-1, 8-in-1, it has a distemper vaccine in it.
Okay.
It's 8 different things in there, and distemper is one of them.
Gotcha. So, we're right here. We're on Lyme's and Ehrlichia. That's a big thing here where I live in Indiana. I know a lot of dogs that have it. What are some of the things we can do other than that vaccination, which is not 100%? What are some things we can do to help prevent those tick-borne diseases?
The problem with those tick-borne diseases, and I've dealt with it myself on my personal dogs, your 2 best options is called Bravecto and Simparica Trio. Those are regular Simparica. Those are your best options for tick-borne diseases. Now, those medicines are labeled that the tick technically doesn't have to bite the dog to die from it. And so the theory is that the tick gets on the dog, the flea gets on the dog, all that stuff, and it kills those parasites before they fed enough to inject that disease into the dog. I've always used Bravecto until here recently. I use Bravecto, which is a 3-month flea and tick pill. And then I used ProHeart, which is a 6-month, or you can do a 12-month version for heartworms. The problem with the Bravecto, and in the last couple months, I've switched to Simparica Trio in my dogs. The Bravecto, there's 4 or 5 different major ticks that we see. Bravecto is labeled for 12 weeks. It will kill, repel whatever ticks and fleas for 12 weeks, so 3 months. One tick, and I'm not for sure exactly which one, but I think it's a Lone Star tick. It is only killed by Bravecto for 2 months. It's guaranteed for 2 months, not 3 months. And so my handler has told me over the last couple months that he is finding ticks on the dogs after that second month is up. And after I got to looking at it and researching it and thinking, I was like, well, that's because it doesn't kill this one tick, but for 8 weeks. And so we had switched because my best dog, Jed, was diagnosed with very light positive Lyme disease a couple months back after being on Bravecto. And so we switched to Simparica Trio. My dogs are handled by a guy in Kentucky, Jason Daugherty, and I can't get up there often. Sometimes I'm 6 months before I see him. And so it's hard for me to get up there and give him the ProHeart shot. So he said, look, I'm good about giving medication. I remember to do it every month rather than every 3 months. It's going to be easier for me to do it every month. And so we switched them to Simparica Trio. Simparica Trio does heartworms, it does fleas, and it does ticks, and it does a whole month. Okay, so instead of doing the flea and tick pill once every 3 months, we do it every month now. But it is guaranteed to kill all all four of those major lines of ticks for the whole month. And so I expect that we're going to see less and less ticks on the dogs now that we're on something that's going to kill them for the whole month.
Yeah, so if they're on a Simparica Trio, say you've got your dog on it and they've been on it for 4 years, does that that pill and that prevention become less effective? Do the dogs build up an immunity to that? Should a guy switch them every once in a while?
So technically, all drugs, there's going to be some immunity, some breakthroughs with it, and which is why I use ProHeart on my dogs for years. HeartGuard, which is ivermectin, and then just straight ivermectin, which is the cattle and pig dewormer people use on dogs a lot of times, especially hunt dogs. Interceptor, which is another heartworm pill. All those pills have been out 20 or 30 years. And so there are resistance issues to most of those pills. And on a daily basis, when I was a regular daytime veterinarian, I would diagnose a dog with heartworms that I could look back in the records and I can see that this dog was given that pill I sold it to him. I'm not saying they gave it, but I sold it to him every single month for 2 years straight. And the dog was negative for heartworms 1 year, and then next year it tested positive. And so they started doing research on these dogs in these cases, and they finally found that there's resistance issues where some of these dogs are getting heartworms despite being on heartworm prevention. And so in horses and cows and all this, they do a lot of this rotational worming where they'll use Quest 1 month and they'll switch them to praziquantel, and then they'll switch them to something else. They do rotational dewormings on cows and horses a lot because of resistance issues. We really don't see that quite as often in dogs. We don't really see that in the Bravecto and Simparica Trio yet, but it is coming. To answer your question, it probably won't do you any good to switch every 2 or 3 years, because just because you switch doesn't mean your neighbors right by you switch. And so those fleas and ticks and all that stuff are going to cross back and forth. And after a population of fleas have been exposed to the same medication, same treatment over and over and over and over for years and years and years, their bodies are going to eventually find a way around it. Same thing with bacterial resistance, antibiotic resistance in people and all this stuff. That's why vets have been blamed for years and years on causing all this, resistant drugs, resistant bacteria to all of our antibiotics, is because they say vets overuse antibiotics. And we as vets and as human doctors have to be careful on how often we prescribe antibiotics, because the more it's prescribed, the less likely it is going to work in the future. And so as time goes on, they're going to come up with new ones. Simparica Trio is pretty new. Regular Simparica, which is just a flea and tick part, is pretty new. Bravecto is pretty new. Back when I got out of vet school in 2008, we had Comfortis had just come out. It's called Spinosad. It just did flea only. Frontline and Advantage, I'm sure most people remember those. Those had been out for 10, 15, 20 years before I got out of vet school, and they just don't work anymore. I mean, you can put that on a dog and the fleas go up there and drink it like it's water, because it just doesn't work anymore. So eventually, that's why these companies are always coming out with new medications, is because eventually it's not going to work. But to be honest with you, in that dog's lifetime, it's probably okay to give that dog the same flea and tick pill forever until that population of fleas becomes immune to it. So it's not the dog itself making it, it's that population of fleas and ticks that are there.
The Houndsman XP Podcast is fueled by Joy Dog Food. Joy Dog Food has a rich tradition of supporting the Houndsman of America. Founded in 1945, Joy is proud of its history and the relationship it has built with the American Houndsman. And in 76 years, there's never been a recall. Made with 100% American-made high-quality ingredients, Joy dog food has one of the highest calorie-dense formulas on the market. For 76 years, this made-in-America product has kept hunting dogs in the field day after day, season after season. And when we say made in America, Joy has a long track record of fighting for American freedoms by being on the front lines against the animal rights movement and their extremist tactics. Joy will fuel your hounds and fight for your freedoms, fueled by Joy.
You know, a lot of our listeners run big, large packs of hounds. You know, they're big game hunters. They're running big game. They're running hogs, coyotes, all that. Those types of preventions can get expensive, and they can be costly every month at $30 a pill. So, you know, some of them go and they do the ivermectin themselves, or they look for alternative methods to treat their dogs for simply just for cost savings. Not because they don't care about their hounds. It just hurts the pocketbook. What are some things that we can do maybe to help ease that load? And, you know, even if it's not easing the load, is there a good reason why we should stick with these vet prescribed pills rather than doing it ourselves? Like, is there a benefit for us maybe in the long run?
Yeah. So the good news about especially heartworm stuff, you know, the flea and tick stuff, not so much, but the heartworm stuff, like the pills, Interceptor, HeartGuard, Trifexis, you know, all these heartworm pills, and even Pro Heart and all them now too, they all have a guarantee with their product. So if your dog is current on heartworm prevention and it was tested negative before you started, and then you do it, and you can show that, hey, I did the Pro Heart 6 every 6 months at my vet office, and your vet keeps records and all this stuff, or Pro Heart 12, which is a 12-month shot. You show that you've taken, you know, you did your part. Basically, that drug company gives a guarantee with their product that your dog is going to stay heartworm free. And if it doesn't, most of them, I've had some trouble with some of the companies like Trifexis. That's why I don't recommend it. But most of the companies, especially Pro Heart and Simparica Trio and all those, they're newer. And so if there's a dog that comes up heartworm positive, they'll give your vet a stipend basically to treat your dog for heartworms for free. And so over the years, I've had a bunch of them, not Pro Heart and not Trio yet, but the HeartGuard and Interceptor dogs and all those, that the drug companies wrote me $1,000 check to treat that dog for heartworms for free. And then they go ahead and they give that owner a year supply of the prevention free as well. But in my opinion, I always tell these people, I'm like, take that prevention and sell it to somebody else, because obviously in your dog, it's not working. So why would you give your dog that same prevention that it already got heartworms on? So that's my biggest, I guess, pet peeve about the heartworm side, is that I'm not keeping my dog on the same prevention that it got heartworms on in the first place. You know, so that is the plus to doing it through a vet office. Now, I myself grew up with hog dogs. I coon hunted my whole life, squirrel hunted, ran deer dogs. I mean, anything you can think of dog wise other than like bird dogs. I even have a duck dog. Anything you can think of other than like a quail or pheasant type dog I've had. And we have done everything as far as flea and tick and heartworm prevention. But for these big game hunters and these people that run, you know, 20 or 30 coyote dogs or 20 or 30 pack of deer dogs, I tell those people to give those dogs ivermectin. Okay, there's no guarantee with it, but it's going to work most of the time as long as you give the right dose and it's safe. But if you don't give the right dose, I've seen dogs die from it, and you got to make sure you give it every month. I see dogs at my emergency clinic that come in dying, coughing up blood and all this stuff because the dog was heartworm positive and they decided to start it on ivermectin. You really can't do that because it's going to either kill them or it's going to cure them. It's going to kill the heartworms and cure the dog, or it's going to kill the heartworms and kill the dog. So that's the negative to doing the ivermectin route. But if you can test your dogs and make sure that they're all negative when you get them, and then start them on the ivermectin every single month, it's okay. It's better than doing nothing. 1 out of 10 dogs will probably still get heartworms while they're taking the ivermectin, but 1 out of 10 is better than 10 out of 10, which is what's going to happen if you don't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our preventions as puppies. We went on to HeartGuard, flea and tick prevention. Another big topic in the hound world is thyroid. Oh, my dog, he's not performing. He's got thyroid issues, you know.
Sure.
Let's dive into that a little bit. Let's take a deep dive into that. Let's start with, okay, is there an age where a dog is, okay, they can possibly have thyroid issues? Because I've heard that if the dog's under 3 years old, they can't have thyroid issues. Is that true or false?
I would say that's false. I've seen it as young as a year old. Okay, they can have congenital hypothyroidism. That's not a hound thing normally. And I'll be honest with you, it's going to make a lot of people mad probably. But most hypothyroid hounds are not truly hypothyroid. Okay, that's our way of making an excuse for that dog of being, poor doing, basically.
Right.
Now, not saying it's the owner's fault, not saying it's the vet's fault, but in my opinion, hypothyroid dogs, if you look it up and you research it, hypothyroid dogs are fat, they're lazy, they no matter if you put them on a diet, they don't lose weight, they pant a lot, and they're just poor doing all in general. You don't see many hounds in general that are fat. I mean, they get their guts ran out, and to be honest, they are not generally hypothyroid dogs. Okay, most thyroid disease, thyroid illness in hounds is probably the most overdiagnosed thing, kind of like ADHD in kids. You just let those kids grow out of it. In my opinion, most of them are going to be okay. Same way with those dogs. Most of the time, if you diagnose a dog with hypothyroid, it's probably because its thyroid is low. It's not a vet being wrong. There's something there making that dog's thyroid low. Okay, all these tick diseases we just talked about, that is probably the most common reason for a dog to have a hypothyroid like illness is tick disease. Okay, in dogs, honestly, as a vet, you're not supposed to test a dog for thyroid disease if they're sick from any other reason. It's called a non-thyroidal illness. Any dog that's sick is probably going to have a low thyroid, and that's not your primary problem. We call that a secondary problem. So a lot of times if you put them on thyroid medication, it's going to make them better. It's going to make them feel better, but you didn't fix the underlying issue. So it may only last for a week. It may only last for a month. It may only last for a year or two, but that dog is going to eventually get sicker until you find out the underlying issue. One of my personal dogs, we ran a thyroid on him because I'm like, look, this dog used to be legit and he's not no more. All these hound people think that thyroid is the end all be all of a dog issue. So let's run a thyroid test on this dog and see. And this dog tested low normal. That's what you find on most of these true thyroid dogs, is that they're not true thyroid. When it says low normal, that means that dog has some other illness. And then when I tick tested this dog, he had every disease known to man that a tick would give. And that's why this dog was showing low thyroid. And it was like a 0.7. It wasn't even super low. Normal range, and it all depends on what machine you're using and if you're doing it in the house or you're sending it out. But like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 is a normal thyroid range. Less than 0.7, they consider true hypothyroid disease. 0.7 to 1 on my machine is what they consider in the gray zone, where that dog may be thyroid, hypothyroid, or it may be that it has a non-thyroidal, hypothyroid illness. And so in my opinion, you got to dig deeper and you got to find that the dog is healthy from all other aspects before you say my dog is truly hypothyroid. Because once you start them on thyroid medication, their body's going to get used to having that medication, and it's hard after that to ever take them off of it. If you take them off of it, they're going to go downhill quick because their body's gotten used to that excessive thyroid supplement that you're giving them. And so it's probably been the killer of a lot of dogs, their career, basically, by putting them on thyroid medication unneeded and then take them off of it. Been a lot of good dogs probably got shot and euthanized because they wouldn't perform after they'd been taken off of their thyroid medication. And it's not because they were truly thyroid, but it was just because their body got used to it.
Right. So, okay, let's say that we've got a dog who, like you said, he's legit, and all of a sudden he's not legit. Is that something that we should be looking at? Okay, for 2 weeks, the dog's not acting the same. Let's run a test. Or is it something that, okay, it's been a month and he's not acting the same. Let's run a test. Yeah, what are the signs?
You should run other tests first. So you should never run a thyroid test on a dog like that until you've exhausted all the other reasons. Tick diseases is your first one you should do, depending on where you are and where the dog's been hunting at. But you should run a 4DX test on him, and then you should also send out a tick panel. Most of a lot of the vets I've ran into, with my handler bringing them to other vets, when I'm not able to get to them, they want to run a 4DX test only, and that's going to tell you positive or negative, but it's not going to tell you that the dog's actively sick. Like Jed, I'm currently waiting on a panel to come back on his Lyme disease, because the vet that we originally took him to in Kentucky wanted him to be started on Doxy for 30 days. Well, as most of y'all know, when you start Doxy for 30 days, they got to lay up for 30 days, if not 45, because it's something, and I never knew this before I started the hound deal, something with that Doxy kills their smell. They can't act like they smell a coon at all. They'll run all night long and never tree and never even make a bark, because they can't smell. That Doxy does something to their smell and their ability to track something. But they wanted to start this dog on Doxy, and I told them, I said, look, did y'all run a quant value on him to see what his Lyme value was? And they said, no, we don't generally do that. We just treat him with Doxy. And I said, yeah, it's a different situation. I said, this dog's got a lot of big hunts coming up. I don't want to lay him up for 45 days for no reason. I said, so I'll bring him back home with me, and I'll do a quant value on him. And I'm waiting on that quant value to come back. They do a quantitative value on the Lyme disease. If it's 30 or greater, that means it's an active infection and the body's not going to take care of it on its own, and you got to treat them with Doxy at that point. If they are less than 30, that means more than likely the dog is going to clear that infection on his own, and he's going to test negative in 30 to 60 days. And so on those dogs, I don't run Doxy through them, unneedingly, because Doxy is one of the few drugs that we have that will treat Ehrlichia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme disease, and all these other tick diseases that we see in these hunting dogs. So we don't want to exhaust, Doxy for no reason. So I would never test one for hypothyroid until I've done at least a 4DX test and full blood work to check a CBC, chemistry panel, electrolytes, and then also a tick panel sent out, because it's going to test for other things that 4DX can't test for. That 4DX tests for 3 tick diseases and heartworms. And there's a lot more tick diseases that these dogs can get. And plus, it doesn't tell you the difference between the Ehrlichia species. There's multiple different species of Ehrlichia that these dogs get, and they all act differently. And same thing with anaplasmosis. They're different diseases, and they'll cause different things. Some of them are respiratory, cause them a cough. Some of them are blood related, it causes them to get anemic. And so you got to do all that preliminary work basically before you would ever test that dog for thyroid. And if he tests positive for any tick disease or anemic or anything on his blood work is off, thyroid test is going to be unreliable and unneeded at that point. You got to clear everything else up and then test him for thyroid if he doesn't get better once his blood work's better.
So I've heard you say something a couple times here, and it interests me. You said, you've learned a lot since you got into the competition hunting, especially about the tick stuff. And you're a vet, you're a doctor. You went to vet school. That leads me to believe that, maybe some of these vets that we're taking our dogs to, not that they don't mean well. Maybe they just don't know what we're dealing with. So what is a person supposed to do if their dog is displaying all these signs of something's not right, and you want to run all these tests on them? Are these terms that we can take into, our local vet and say, hey, I want to check for A, B, and C. Can you do that? Or are there vets who just are not able to do that because they don't know what it is?
Most of them are going to know what it is. Now, a lot of them, to be honest, aren't going to be able to run it in-house. Like, I'm able at my clinic to run a 4DX test, heartworm test, CBC, electrolyte, chemistry panel, coagulation test, ultrasounds, x-rays. I can do a lot of that stuff at my emergency clinic. Most of the other clinics in my town, and we probably have 7 or 8 clinics between my 2 little towns right there close to me, and most of them don't have ultrasound. Very few of them have ultrasound. Very few of them, I think there's probably 2 of them, and counting me, that has a coagulation panel to check for rat poison. So it all depends on the vet. But to be honest, if they can't run it in-house, they can easily draw the sample and send it off. A lot of the clinics, I've figured this out as well since I got into the, handlers in Kentucky type deal. A lot of those smaller clinics in Kentucky and stuff can't even run a CBC, chemistry, and electrolytes in the house, which checks kidney function, liver function, anemia, and all that. Most of them have to send them out. Now, they get them back the next day or 2 days later, but, a lot of them don't even have blood machines in clinic, and it's hard for me as an emergency veterinarian to fathom that, but that is it. But the best thing to do is for the owners to kind of do some research on their own as far as what tick diseases they worry about, what's in their area and all that. And then call a local vet office and talk to them and say, hey, look, I have a dog that's doing this, and I think he may have a tick disease. What tick disease stuff can y'all do in house? And what tick disease stuff are you okay sending out? And so I would just be straight up honest with the people and the vet and tell them, what you want. And then most of them are going to do what the owner asks, and just tell the vet, hey, look, if you don't feel like this is needed, let me know, because I don't want to waste money for no reason, because in certain cases, there's certain things that point to certain diseases. And so if it's not pointing to a tick disease, there's no reason to spend $200 or $300 sending out all this tick stuff. And so sometimes an owner may think a vet's just not wanting to do it, and the vet's actually trying to save them money. Now, some vets are going to do the opposite and want to charge them everything they can charge them to get everything they can get out of them. And that's the sad part of it, is you never know which vet you're dealing with until you get in there and you experience it once or twice.
Right. So if we go to the emergency side of things, because that's what you are now, emergency vet clinic, stuff has hit the fan. It's bad when they're coming to see you. What are some things that maybe, us hound hunters can keep on hand for an emergency kit? Like, is there anything that we should be keeping in stock at our house? Because I know for myself, the nearest emergency vet clinic is over an hour away. Is there a list of things we should keep on hand in our house, in our fridge, in our truck, that, hey, when stuff hits the fan, this is what you need and this is how you use it?
Yeah, you kind of gets a little sticky there, because I guess the one thing I would tell people that they should carry is Benadryl, just oral Benadryl. Where y'all are, Bryce, you don't have to worry about it as much, but where I'm at, snake bites are a big deal. We see tons of copperheads, cottonmouths, which are moccasins, and then, rattlesnakes even in North Louisiana. And if those dogs, get bit by that, and you're, 30, 45 minutes deep in the woods and you got an hour drive to an emergency clinic, your dog's going to be a little more comfortable if you give him Benadryl. Now, is that dog going to die if you don't give him Benadryl before you get to the vet office? No, most of the time not. Snake bites in dogs aren't near as bad as in people. Me and you get bit by a snake and we don't get antivenom, we die most of the time. But dogs, not so much. We don't even do antivenom in dogs. We give them steroids, we give them pain meds, we give them Benadryl, and we give them antibiotics because they get infections. But if I had to tell somebody, if you had a vet that was a friend of yours, or you had, a feed store owner that would sell you something, keeping some penicillin in your box is not a bad deal, but it needs to be in the fridge. And then keeping a steroid like, dexamethasone or something like that, it's not a bad thing to have on hand, as long as you use it correctly. It's a good thing for certain things. I sent my handler some steroids and Benadryl and antibiotics and that kind of stuff just to keep on hand in case he's at a big hunt and the dog gets in a bind and I'm not able to get up there. But for most people that don't have a vet friend or a vet on speed dial, steroids and antibiotics and all those things are hard to get your hands on. So the easiest thing to get your hands on that would help is Benadryl, because it is really good for swollen throat and that kind of stuff from like a bee sting or a wasp sting or a snake bite or, infection from an abscess or something like that. Benadryl will help that swelling. But most of those things there, you just got to get them into a vet when you can.
Right. So let's say it's not quite an emergency. You're at a big hunt. Say we're at Super Stakes. We've been hunting for a week. And on the last day, our dog, maybe you pull him out of the box and he's got a swollen ankle. Looks like he's, twisted something. A Carprofen is something that I keep on hand a lot for like an anti-inflammatory. Is that something good? Am I doing something wrong? But I just know that's what I've had for a long time in the box is Carprofen for that kind of situation.
Yeah. Yep. No. Carprofen or Remedil is another name for it. Is going to be the best thing for that kind of situation. And I actually sent my handler some Remedil, injectable form and oral form for that kind of issue. So yes, that is definitely okay. It is a prescription. So it's one of those things that you got to have a friend that sends it to you, a vet friend that sends it to you. Or if you have a dog that gets injured and they give you 2 weeks of it and you only need 5 days and the dog's back to normal, keep the rest of it on hand for those kind of situations. But certain medications like steroids and Remedil, Carprofen, can't be given at the same time because it'll mess up the stomach and can shut the kidneys down. So you got to be careful with what you give. And when you give it, if you do have to bring the dog to a vet, you got to make sure you tell the vet what you gave so that we as veterinarians know not to give something that's going to make matters worse. But yes, Carprofen is a great drug for swollen ankles and, even dog bites where they get bit and they're swollen a little bit from it. Those kind of things, Carprofen is real good for that. I keep it in my clinic and I use it a lot.
The Houndsman XP Podcast Network is powered by Cajun Lights. All of your lighting needs for hunting can be taken care of at Cajun Lights. They have 3 models of cap lights. I'm going to run through them real quick. You've got the Rougarou, which is their high-end light. If you're a competition hunter and you got to find that coon up in a tree and it's all riding on finding that coon, you'll want the Rougarou on your head. Next is the Bayou. That's a pretty standard light, but it's got packed with features. It's got multiple colors. It's got walking lights. It's got the red, the green, the amber. It's all built in right into that light. And then you have one of my personal favorites, the Micro Gator. The Micro Gator is an ultra lightweight cap light. It's got all the features of a white light, red, green, and amber. I've used this light for everything from finding bear tracks early in the morning to coon hunting at night to working on plumbing in the house, changing tires on the side of the road. My truck doesn't leave the driveway without a Cajun light in it, and that light is the Micro Gator. Every Cajun light is durable, made from the highest quality components, and it is backed by Cajun's top-rated customer service. Check out Cajun Lights. You can go to our website at houndsmanxp.com, go to our sponsors page, hit that link, it'll take you right to Cajun Lights. Check them out. They got a lot of stuff to offer over at Cajun Lights.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit from, vet stuff to just general hound care. And the biggest one on that, and if anybody is big into the competition hunting, it seems to come in cycles. About once every 3 months, somebody will make a post about dog food. And then the whole world blows up, and it seems like everybody and their brother is switching foods and asking questions. What is your feelings on the dog foods? Do you think you should switch up maybe blends of feed certain times a year for the summer, run a lighter protein and maybe a heavier protein in the winter? Let's just dive into dog food. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's a big discussion. The dog food deal, the problem with dog food, there is no steadfast rule on which food is best and which food should be fed when. Okay, I tell everybody it's an experiment with the dog. Every dog is different, just like every person is different. You can do this diet plan, and I could do the same diet plan, and you lose 50 pounds, and I gain 50. Every one of them is different. Same thing with foods. I feed all my personal dogs at home Purina Pro Plan. Okay, that's just mainly because as a veterinarian, they do a lot for veterinary medicine. They do a lot of research, and it's a really good food, and they give me a big discount on it when I buy it. That is why I've always fed it. I fed Science Diet for a long time too, and my dogs did really good on it. Most of these dogs I'm talking about are just house dogs. Dogs that are good for the kids, and that's about all they're good for. I got a lab that's 14 years old now, and he's been on Science Diet for the first 6 or 7 years of his life and did great. And then he switched over to Purina Pro Plan, and for the last 6-7 years, he's done great on it too. So every dog is different. Same thing with the blends. I mean, in my opinion, I don't like to switch foods often, but I don't mind switching like on the Joy and that kind of stuff where they have the higher protein and then they have the lower protein. It depends on your hunting. Like my handler hunts 6 days a week year round. Where I'm at, you can hunt 6 days a week year round because your dog's going to get eaten by an alligator or get eaten by a snake. It's a lot harder on us where we are to hunt that often because of how hot it is and the critters that's around. But where my handler's at up in Kentucky, they don't have to worry about poisonous snakes as much. They don't have alligators. He's a hard hunter and he hunts 6 days a week. And honestly, on those dogs, he doesn't generally switch the protein level and fat level up on them because he's hunting them the same year round. If he finds that they're getting a little too chunky, he'll cut back on how much he's giving them more than anything. So you just got to experiment with it, find a food that works for that dog, for your hunting style, and your weather, your climate. Of course, the further north you get, the more fat they need in their diet and the more protein they need in their diet because it's colder. The more you hunt them, the more fat and the more protein they need. You're going to lay one up for 4 months during the summer in Louisiana, then I'd cut down on their fat and on their protein because they're going to get fat. You got a female that's bred, I switch those dogs to puppy food. That's what most vets tell you to do. As soon as they're bred, they should be switched over to true puppy food. Gives them more protein, more fat, more vitamins, all the stuff they need for getting ready to nurse puppies. And then I feed them puppy food all the way through until the puppies are actually weaned, and then at that point I slowly transition them back to their normal food. And anytime you change them, even from one protein percent and fat percent to a different, even if it's the same food and it's just a different blend, you really want to do that over a 5 to 7 day period of time. Because if not, it can cause them to get a stomach upset, vomits and diarrhea, that kind of stuff if it's switched suddenly. So you don't want to just take them off one and switch them to the other. That's a really big deal if you switch in brands. If you go from Joy to Purina or Purina to Joy or, one of those deals, you want to switch them over a 5 to 7 day period where you put a couple kibble of the new in with the old for a day. And then the next day, double the amount of new, take away a little bit of the old, and just slowly transition them until they get to all the new food.
All right. So what about feeding times? I personally have always just done it where when I get done hunting at night, I feed everything. That might be at 10 o'clock at night in the wintertime when I'm done, and that might be at 2, 3 in the morning whenever I get done hunting in the summertime. I feed once a day whenever I get done hunting. I know some people say, oh, well, you should feed less twice a day. Does that matter? Is there anything that backs one way or the other as far as feeding goes?
I feel like that's a personal preference on the owner and a personal preference on the dog. I tell most of my clients to feed twice a day. The only reason is because of a twisted stomach. So when I feed twice a day, like all my personal dogs, I feed twice a day. Whatever I would give them once a day, I split in half. And so they're getting the same amount. They're just getting 2 smaller portions. GDV or a twisted stomach is a big deal. We see, Labs, Great Danes. I've seen it in a couple hounds. We don't see it as much in hounds, thankfully. But it's when the stomach is full and it twists on itself and it cuts circulation off to both sides of the stomach. The stomach will actually die, and they need an emergency surgery within an hour to 2 hours of the stomach flipping. And if they don't, they die from it. Me as an emergency vet, I've done tons of those surgeries and have good luck with them if we get them in right away. But if you don't catch them right away and the owners are gone for 8 hours and they come home and it's bloated and in a bind, usually when you take that dog to surgery, his stomach's dead. You have to put it to sleep on the table. But I have seen in most research that they think that those GDVs happen less frequently if they're fed twice a day, smaller amounts. So I tell most people twice a day, smaller amounts. But my dad's got tons. We got hog dogs and just squirrel dogs, that kind of stuff at his house, and he feeds all those once a day, and they've never had an issue. So I really don't think it's an end all be all type deal. But my opinion personally, I feed all my dogs twice a day.
Gotcha. So talking about that twisted stomach, that's a pretty time sensitive deal. What is something that somebody should look for in that? Like, is there signs that pop up immediately that should register and, okay, I got to go right now?
Yeah. So those dogs are going to be trying to vomit and they can't. So it's going to be called retching. They're going to be, and trying to vomit stuff up and nothing comes up. And then if you wait too long, you'll actually see that the stomach starts swelling and air starts, forming in the stomach, and it almost feel like they got a basketball inside their stomach. That at that point is a true GDV. Now, dogs, if they overeat, so let's say you got a crazy puppy that carries out of his pen and opens his food container and eats, 5 gallons of food, he's going to get a big stomach from that, and that will predispose it to flipping. So you can have a bloat where they just blow up, their stomach blows up with air, or they overeat and they get food distension, but it doesn't twist. But anytime you see one that does that and it eats too much and it gets bloated like that, the next thing that happens after that, if they run and they play and they flip and they turn over and stuff, is the stomach can twist. So I tell people, if you see a dog that's retching and trying to throw up and it can't, they got to go in right away, because that is the first sign of a GDV, and then their stomach fills up with gas.
Good information to have.
Nothing to do at home. Nothing to do at home for those. You just got to get them into the vet office, ASAP.
Yeah, that's good information. Just something to keep an eye out, because my lab, goodness gracious, she would eat 5 gallons of food if you put it in front of her.
That's right.
If I do not portion her out, and whatever I put in front of her, it's gone in about 2 wharfs.
Yep.
It's done.
That's right. Yep. Mine same way.
All right, so we're at Super Steak still. We've talked about our emergency kit. We're late in the week, late round bound. We're Thursday night. We've been hunting all week long, double rounds. Is there anything that you can give that dog who is just worn out and tired, a little extra juice, a little boost? We can go to the gas station, we can grab a 5-hour Energy or a Monster, and we can have a high for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that for dogs? Is there anything out there that we can give them to just get right through that last late round?
Yeah. The first handler I had work for me, Josh Sizemore, he really, really believed in that stuff called Bounce Back. It's a high calorie electrolyte formula basically that you mix in the water. And after the early round, we had a dog named Punch that we were hunting back then, been a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he would always give him, that before the late round. And he swore up and down that helped him, that if he didn't give it to him, he noticed a difference. Me personally, I don't know if I ever noticed a big difference, but he's the one that hunted that dog all the time. I trusted what he said, and it's definitely not going to hurt the dog at all. So there's multiple companies that make those kind of electrolyte pouches of stuff that you can give them. So I would tell somebody that would be your best bet if you had one that you felt like kind of runs down on that late round. It's called Bounce Back. I know, and like I said, I know there's multiple companies that make them, but that's just the one that he believed in and he used and seemed to work, good for that dog and for Josh. It's just like I say, just mix it in the water and they drink it and they like it, and some dogs, I have found that some dogs don't need it. I know multiple dogs that are better late round than they are early round. There are some dogs that are that way. On those dogs, I wouldn't give them anything. But on some of these dogs that just kind of give it their all that first hour and a half or 2 hours, it definitely would be something that could help those dogs.
Yeah, I've used Bounce Back for a long time. That's something that, my buddy Shane got me turned on to. Dick Brothers. Yeah. We did our first interview with him on this podcast. He believes in Bounce Back. Yeah. So it's something that I've used and I'm familiar with. So I didn't know if there was, just that or if there was anything else we can give him, but it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page.
Yep. I think that's the best right now.
All right. So let's swap roles. Let's take off the vet hat and let's put on our competition coon hunter hat. So anybody who's been around the game, here recently knows who you are. And they know that you've had a couple handlers for you with some top-notch hounds. And, I think just saying, friend to friend, that's something to be proud of. You've had some really, really nice hounds. You're the owner. You're the guy who's pushing the handler. You're paying these guys to go to the hunts. How do you pick the right handler? How did you pick Josh? How did you pick Jason? What are you looking for in those guys?
Josh was kind of just a kind of a coincidence type deal with Josh. I had a old black and tan that I hunted for years and years. I mean, he was 14 years old when he died. And, I took that dog to vet school with me and I went down to Baton Rouge for vet school and hunted 3 or 4 nights a week there on the Chaffly River. It was a 4-hour drive, a 2-hour drive, hour and a half drive or something like that, hour and a half drive for me. And I'd go there, depending on what part of the WMA I'd go to. I'd go there 2 or 3 nights a week if I had tests or not, just kind of depending. And, I got really close to that dog and spent a lot of time down there in Baton Rouge in my 6 years I was down there in school. And then when I got out of school, I continued to hunt him a little bit till I kind of retired him. And he wasn't a competition dog. I'd never been in competition hunting before then. He was just a pleasure dog, a hide dog. We killed some coons to him and, coons weren't worth a lot back then, but I didn't have much money. So, everyone I killed, I'd skin out and I'd sell the hides to the fur company and I'd sell the meat to people I knew in town that would eat it, and I just, it's just something I grew up doing. My grandpa used to do it. And, back then hides were $20, $30 a piece. And that's how they made a lot of their extra money. He cut hay and had a farm and had milk cows and all this stuff, but he made a lot of his money, with trapping and coon hunting and stuff after. And after I lost that dog, I kind of stopped hunting for a long time and for years, multiple years, 6, 7, 8 years probably. and just didn't want anything to do with it anymore because, that dog was super close to me and I was super close to him. And so I finally decided that, it was time. I had a little boy that was born that was 2-3 years old. And, I knew I wanted to show him that, when he got a little bit older. And so I looked on ProHound and saw an ad that caught my eye, and I called the guy and talked to him for a little bit, and just didn't feel like the dog was for me. And, I called the next one that kind of caught my eye, and it was Josh, and I started talking to him, and we just kind of hit it off. And, he said, look, I don't have anything going on for the next week or two. You got anywhere to hunt down there? And I was like, yeah. I said, RWMA's just opened a week or two ago. He said, well, look, you just give me some gas money and I'll drive the dog down there to you. And he was coming from Kentucky. He said, I'll drive the dog down there to you, and we'll go hunt for, 3 or 4 nights if you got it, and see if you like him. I said, okay, that sounds like a good deal. So he came down and brought a dog that was an action-packed type dog. The dog, treed a bunch of trees and just never had a coon. He was the dog that's going to make something happen, right or wrong. And that night, the first 2 or 3 nights, they were just wrong. They were some of them were, I could consider circle trees, but most of them were slicks, I paid Josh his gas money, and the dog got sick on that 3rd day. And so I brought him to my clinic, and he was a thyroid dog, he was a thyroid dog, and Josh hadn't been giving his thyroid medicine to him like he should. And he said he just didn't believe the dog was a thyroid dog. And so I ran some blood work on the dog, and, kind of person I am, I didn't charge Josh for the blood work or anything. I ran the blood work at my clinic, and everything was good on the blood work. And I said, look, let me send a thyroid test off. And I sent the thyroid test off, and the dog was low on his thyroid. And again, that was kind of before I really knew what I know now as far as the hunting dog side, because I didn't even tick test the dog, which I didn't have at that point. I didn't even carry 40X tests at my clinic, so I couldn't have tested him anyway. But I told Josh to start him back on his thyroid meds and find somebody else to buy him because I didn't want him, and I gave him some extra money for coming down and spending his time. And he called me a couple of weeks after that and said, hey, look, I found a dog, that I think you might like. It's a friend of mine that owns him. He's a young dog, but he's coming on. And Chris Bolin is the guy that owned that dog. And I bought the dog over the phone without ever hunting with the dog. I trusted Josh, even though I just met him. I trusted him and talked to Chris and trusted Chris, and I bought the dog, for a good amount of money for me back then. I bought the dog, and dog was pretty good. Josh won a couple of hunts with him and stuff, and then Josh, kind of figured out that this dog needs a little more training than what Josh was able to do. Josh was a newer style competition hunter and hunted a lot for his whole life, but had never done a lot of training and that kind of stuff, and kind of figured out the dog wasn't going to be what we needed, wasn't going to be what I needed if I wanted to do competition hunting. And me and Josh after he'd come down, he started talking to me about competition. And I was like, man, that sounds cool. I think that's something I'd like to do because I'd really never done anything of it. And so we bought the Homer dog as a way to try to start competition hunting. Josh is my handler and me as the owner, and, Homer's a dog. And Josh kind of figured out kind of quickly there that the dog needed a little more work than what he was going to be able to do to make him into a true, big money type competition dog. And so he got on the role of Chris Hatfield owned a dog named Punch, who was a full brother to Homer, but an older litter. He was 3 years old. Homer was just a year old. Chris owned him, and Judas Bolin hunted him a little bit for Chris. And so Josh borrowed the dog from him and took him to a few legacy hunts and a few smaller hunts and black and tan days, and did real good. And, at that time, Josh, kind of told me what they wanted for the dog. I think they wanted $20,000 for him. And I was like, there ain't no way I can buy that dog. I mean, my wife would kill me if I spent $20,000 on a dog right now. I was having marital issues at the time, and so I'm like, that's gonna be my divorce for sure if I buy a $20,000 dog. And so I told him, I said, look, I just can't do it, and I backed out of the deal for a little while, and then my wife decided she wanted a divorce anyway, and so after she told me she wanted a divorce, I bought the dog. At that time I didn't have anything stopping me from buying the dog, so I told Josh again, I bought the dog, $20,000. Never saw the dog in person, never hunted with the dog, just went off of Josh and Judas and Chris Hatfield, and bought the dog. And, he turned out to be a stellar of a dog and won a $20,000 integrity series for me and Josh, and a bunch of other smaller PKC hunts. And he was a platinum champion, doubled up at the nationals. You know, he had a good run. And then we had let a kid hunt him and at the youth hunt, and he ended up getting run over. You know, I did it as me and Josh did it as a gesture of kindness to a young kid who had not hunted much. And when he did hunt, he didn't have a dog that was worth anything really. And we let him hunt the dog. Josh was with him, and they cast the dogs out, and he got on the road and got ran over, got killed. And Josh was heartbroken. I was heartbroken. You know, we were both down and out for a while, and Josh, you know, started talking to me about buying another dog. And, you know, I told him I was done. I didn't want anything else to do with competition hunting. It bit me in the butt, cost me a lot of money. You know, I didn't have the dog insured, and I was down. You know, I love that dog. I didn't see him a whole bunch, but, you know, back then, like I said, I was going through a divorce, and I went every other weekend when I didn't have my 3 kids. I was at a hunt somewhere with Josh and that dog, and I got close to him, you know, and so it kind of tore me up when he got killed, and I backed out for, you know, a couple of weeks, I would say. I told Josh I didn't want anything to do with it, and then he called me and told me he found another dog, and I was like, I don't want anything to do with it. And come to find out, Chris Hatfield had the dog, you know, as well. Same person we bought Punch from. He was an older dog, and I know you know the dog, Jed. His name was No Gamble Jed. Greg Maynard had the dog for a while. Adam Campbell owned the dog. Greg Maynard hunted him, and then, you know, he went to your buddy Basham, and Basham kind of got him lined out and got him on the right road and won a whole bunch of casts with him. And then, you know, you took him to UKC World Hunt and did real good with him, and, you know, I think finished in top 5 or whatever with him there. And I talked to Chris about buying the dog before, kind of after that first round of the UKC hunt, and again, I just wasn't. The dog was 4 or 5 years old, was an older dog, and didn't have a whole bunch of money won, and so I was kind of skeptical about spending that much money on the dog that really didn't have a lot of money won. He wasn't a platinum, he wasn't even a gold champion yet at that point, but he was doing real good. You know, he was on a 10 or 15 cast win streak, and, you know, it was doing good at UKC and all that, you know, the world hunt. And I told Chris, you know, that I would buy him after the hunt. And, you know, he said, well, look, it's going to go up in cost if he wins it. And I was like, I understand that. He said, if he finishes in the top 10, it's going to go up. I said, I understand that as well. So I ended up costing me a little bit more money waiting to buy him, but I ended up buying him before that last night. I called Chris and bought him over the phone. And again, I never hunted with a dog, never been with him, just took, you know, Basham's word and Chris's word and Josh's word, because Josh, I think, had hunted with him once or twice, and ended up buying the dog. And, you know, I think he ended up placing in the top 4 of the AKC World right after that when Josh had him. And me and Josh parted ways after that. And I was really debating on selling the dog because I just, you know, I had a bad taste in my mouth with the way my other dog died. And I just, you know, I was really debating on just selling Jed and getting rid of it. You know, I called you and you hunted him for me in that truck hunt, you know, without you even knowing the dog much. You know, you hunted him for me, you know, and he had some bad luck. You know, he should have won his first cast there, had some bad luck.
He looked good that cast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he looked good, but he looked bad. He treed 3 coons and missed every one of them by 1 tree.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that dog, since then, you know, Josh, and I'm not talking bad about Josh at all, so y'all don't think that. Josh is a hunter that doesn't like to hunt every night, and that is okay for most dogs. Punch was a dog you didn't have to hunt every night. Punch was a dog you hunt him once a week, twice a week. He was the same if you hunted him once, twice a week, or you hunted him every night. You know, he was just that kind of dog. And Josh really thought Jed was that kind of dog until I actually got him in somebody's hand that hunted him every night, and that thing has lit another fire. I mean, he's kicked into another gear since then. I mean, he never misses hardly, knock on wood. You know, he is super fast. He moved better than Punch moved. He's actually more accurate than Punch now that he's hunted up. But he's a dog that you may lay him up one night before the hunt, but you better hunt him every night before that. If not, he's going to go 2.2 miles every single drop. You know, you'll never hear him. You know, he's a dog. He's legit. I mean, he's doing good right now. You know, we had a little scare. One of the vets there in Kentucky thought he had stick stuck in his lung because he's been doing some coughing. And so I took him after that pro sport hunt. He placed second in at pro sport hunt, won 40,000. And I ended up taking him to the veterinary specialist there in New Orleans for a CT scan and a scope because they thought he had a stick stuck in his lung. But come to find out, the specialist redid the x-rays and the spot that was in his lung was getting better and was almost gone. And they did some other testing on him, and that they diagnosed him with a respiratory case of anaplasmosis, which is treatable with medication. And so he didn't have to have a surgery or sedation or anything like that. But he was with me about 7 or 8 days, and I took him back to Jason, and Jason said it was like he forgot everything he taught him. He is just now, that was a week and a half ago, he is just now getting him lined out where he's actually accurate again and listening to him and all that. That dog is a dog that you have to stay on, which I feel like is why he switched hands so many times, is that he's a dog that needs a lot of care and a lot of work. And Jason is definitely the guy that I feel like, his profession allows him to do that. He doesn't work a daytime job. He trains dogs for a living. I pay him to hunt, per month, where I didn't pay Josh. Josh didn't want to be paid, to be truthful. Josh knew he didn't hunt every night, and Josh didn't want to take advantage of me and said, look, I don't want you calling me every night asking me why I'm not hunting since you're paying me to hunt. He said, I just rather you pay the entry fees. We split the winnings and, pay my food and gas and hotels and that kind of stuff. He said, but as far as you paying me every month to hunt, I don't want it because I don't hunt hard enough for that. And I was, thankful that he was honest with me from the beginning. Jason's different. Jason hunts 6 nights a week, sometimes 7 nights a week. He may only be out there an hour or two. He may be out there all night. It just depends on what the dog needs. And, he has definitely been a blessing. He's opened my eyes to a lot of things. And, I was down and out for a while, and I really thought the coon hunting world was a bunch of crooks and a lot of people that want to take advantage of you. And Jason truthfully showed me different. All of them aren't bad. Jason's a good one for sure. How I kind of got involved with Jason, the Homer dog that I originally was talking about that we bought first. Josh had recommended me sending him to Jason because if anybody could get the dog out of all of his bad stuff, it was Jason. And he said, if Jason tells you the dog's not worth, spending time and effort and money in to get him into the competition phase, then, we needed to part ways with him or make him a pleasure dog for somebody. And so Jason started hunting the dog for me, hunting him for a couple months, 2 or 3 months, and said, look, the dog's doing real good. And, I think he may be a competition dog after all. And then he just shut down and started doing terrible again. And I ended up testing him for all the tick stuff, and everything flared back up. And he's just a dog you can hunt frequently. You can't hunt every night because of the Ehrlichia. He's got a bad case of Ehrlichia that just doesn't ever go away. And since then, Jason had called me after me and Josh split ways and said, hey, look, I know you got this Jed dog. Everybody tells me he's the right kind. He just needs a lot of work. He said, you're already paying me every month to hunt Homer. Why don't you send me Jed? We'll see how he looks. And, if he looks good and I like him and you want to send me to some hunts, send me to some hunts. And if not, I'll try to get him lined out for you and you can sell him. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I talked to, Sandra with K-Light. Is a friend of Josh's and a friend of mine and a friend of Jason's and Judas, all of us. And, she highly recommended Jason, and a couple other people as well, had highly recommended him and said, look, there may be, he may not win every cast, but he's a person that's going to be honest with you. And if he tells you, don't go to that, let's not go to this hunt because the dog's looking terrible, then trust what he says. And, that's what I needed, was somebody that I could trust. And Jason is definitely, been that person. He's been a blessing, and I trust everything he says, with all I got, which is what it requires in this line, because to spend the amount of money that I spend on entry fees and the amount of money that I spend on buying these dogs, amount of money I spend on hotels and gas and new trucks for the hunter, for the handler and all this stuff, you got to trust who you're with, and I 100% trust, that he's doing what's best for me and the dog. I don't require him to hunt every night. I don't require him to send me videos or text me or anything like that. I don't ask him if he's hunting, but he's been upfront with me from the beginning, and says, look, I hunt every night except for Sundays most of the time, and if it's needed, I will hunt Sunday night as well. If the dog's looking bad, I'm going to get him right before we go to a hunt. If I tell you to sell the entry, let's sell the entry because we ain't got a chance. To be honest with you, he hated Jed. He hated him for the first 2 months he had him. he told me to sell him, and had a guy that reached out to me after me and Josh split ways and wanted to buy the dog, and I priced him because Jason hated him so much. I priced him for way less than what I thought the dog was worth, and the guy kind of never got back to me after it. So I guess the price I listed for wasn't what he was looking for. So he never got back to me after that on him. And, me and Jason both are thankful, since then. Jason's made him a gold champion since then, and qualified him for the Nationals. He doubled up at the Nationals and then fell apart that next night, which a lot of dogs do. He just placed second in that $100,000 pro sport hunt that Josh actually won with a dog named Bella. I think Randy Smith owned that dog, and Strickland may own part of it. But Josh actually is the one that won that $100,000 hunt, which we congratulate him for that. It was a big accomplishment, and she's a good little dog. She had a night to remember for sure. Jed had an awesome night that night, and just couldn't keep up with her. That early round, Jed looked really good, and late round, he actually beat Echo and that Spice Girl dog that Croson hunts, and they both are legit dogs. And I mean, he did a hell of a job that night, and beat him by 2 coons, and I couldn't have asked for anything better that night. And that next night, he didn't really make any mistakes, in the championship round. Bella's just a really good strike dog, hunter strike dog, and by herself, and is quick. That's the good thing about her. So, I think she had a really good night. I'd like to draw out again because I feel like Jed's going to have a good chance to beat her most nights, but that night was hers for sure, and she deserved it for sure.
Yeah. So I want to ask this. Jason Daugherty is the guy that we're talking about here, folks. If you guys don't know who is hunting for Bronk, it's Jason Daugherty out of Kentucky. And if anybody knows anything about Jason, you know that he loves Facebook, and he makes some of the most comical posts on Facebook.
That is right.
So, Bronk, as an owner, and I'm going to bring this up because Jason put it on Facebook. He said it first. I didn't say it. The night that he handled Jed, or didn't handle Jed, we should say didn't handle Jed.
Yeah.
Got to the tree, handled the dog, scored the tree, and then realized, oh, crap, I've got the wrong dog on the end of my lead.
Yeah.
That was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a $4,000 entry fee hunt.
Correct.
And Jed, the correct dog, had struck for 100 and was by himself with the coon and would have won the cast. What went through your head?
Correct.
What went through your head when you heard that? Were you irate? Because I know me, I would have been irate. And how do you handle that going forward with a handler that you're paying? You pay them monthly, you send them to these big hunts, you've bought him a truck, and he cost you a $4,000 entry fee. Jason, we love you, but we got to know Bronk's side of the story.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I mean, Jason thought he was fired. He called me. He's like, look, man, I know you're going to fire me, but I'm going to tell you the story. I'm like, I'm not going to fire you. Go ahead and tell me the story. They had another cast. For people that don't know the story, they had another cast that cut loose somewhere close to them after they had cut loose. And one of those dogs, after he treed Jed in, one of those dogs came in between the cast and where Jed was treeing at and pulled up treed. And so they were walking straight to Jed and got to that dog first. And Jason had his Garmin in his pocket and did not take it out and look at it. I mean, I wouldn't have either. And that's what I told him. I said, I can't blame you because what you did, I would have done as well. And got the dog, put him on the lead, tied him to the tree, scored the tree. He told me, he keeps me updated through all these casts, and he told me, this tree is a slick, but I think I can get it. I think I can get it circled. I think they're going to circle it, but to me and you, I'm going to tell you this dog don't have this coon. And he said, but I think they're going to circle it. And I was like, okay, that's good. And then a little later, he called me and said, you're never going to believe what happened. I said, what? He said, that wasn't even Jed. I was like, what do you mean that wasn't Jed? He said, that dog's not Jed. It's a dog from another cast. He said, after we scored the tree and all that, I looked at the collar because I went to put the leash to get him off the lead on the tree. And I said, this ain't my dog. He said, I told the judge, and the judge was Mason Bush. And he told the judge, he's like, Judge, this ain't my dog. And the judge was like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, well, I want to go score my dog. And the judge was like, this was a dog I was hearing the whole time. This is a dog I walked into. So I just can't, there's no way we can go tree the other dog because we've already scored this tree. And Jason let it go, which he should have because it was his mistake. And he cut the other dog back loose so he could go back to his original owner and went in there to get Jed, and Jed had a coon, which he had the last like 10 or 12 coons before that. And so went there and got him, and he had a coon. And he was only another like 200 or 300 yards. He wasn't far. I mean, the other dog came in right there where he was and treed. And so he's like, look, I know you're going to fire me. I deserve to be fired. You know, it was a $4,000 entry fee. This would have put us into the next round. I don't even remember what hunt it was now. You probably remember. What hunt was that?
I don't remember what it was. I just remember it was a $4,000 entry fee because my gut sunk whenever I read the post.
I don't know if it was one of the truck hunts. I don't remember which hunt it was, honestly, but it would have moved us on to the next round. It was one of those round type hunts, so it would have moved us on to the next round. I think it was a swag series is what it was. It was a $50,000 swag series. That's what it was. And Jason's like, I just lost us the cast win like $8,000. I said, well, hell, I said, if he's going to win that, he probably would have won the whole thing. You would have just lost us $50,000 what you lost us. He's like, oh, no, don't say that. And I mean, honestly, the thought never crossed my mind to fire him. I mean, it was an honest mistake. It was something that would never happen again because what is the chances of another dog coming in that close to your dog from another cast and treeing in between exactly where you're walking to? I mean, it was just wasn't meant to be cast for us. And that's what a lot of them are. If it's your turn to win, it's your turn to win, and nothing you're going to do is going to mess it up most of the time. That was not our cast to win. Who knows? The next cast, we could have come loose. He could have got hit by a car and got killed. You know, that's the way I look at it. It was God's way of not letting him hunt the next cast for some reason, whether that was something to protect Jason, something to protect the dog. I don't know. We just got to trust that it happened for a reason, and that's what I did. And we joke about it occasionally, but I've never brought it up. And, Jason brings it up if anybody does because he's embarrassed about it still. But it's just one of those things that happens, and thought of firing him never crossed my mind.
That just shows, the type of person that you are, Bronk. I haven't known you too terribly long, but the conversations that we have had, I feel like you're just a genuine person. You and I get along great. We hit it off good. I'm glad to see that you've found somebody who can hunt six nights a week. Because when you asked me to hunt Jed there for a while, I hunted hard for those 2 weeks. But honestly, for me, I can't hunt 6 nights a week. I'm lucky if I can get 3, maybe 4 nights in.
Yeah.
And I understand that, carrying a full-time job, having a family with lots of kids. I understand the limitations. So there was no hard feelings when you found Jason. And honestly, it's been fun watching you and him win. I was rooting for him in that 100,000 hunt, and I was kicking myself in the rear end because I bid him up on the Calcutta, and then I let somebody get it after it went over $100. Like, I'll let somebody else have it.
I'm the one that outbid you.
Oh, son of a gun.
But I saved you some money because we lost.
Yeah, you got second, but I mean, I told Nick, I said, gosh darn it, I should have bought it. I know we lost, but
I think I ended up. I think I ended up because somebody else outbid you originally, and then I outbid them. I think it was 150 or 175, so it wasn't much. But yeah, I saved you $150.
Yeah, you did. We'll look at it that way.
You're welcome. Now, if I would have won, that would have been bad.
Oh man!
If I'd have won first, then I would have cost you a lot of money.
Yeah,
the
you would.
The person that won first, they won a good little chunk of money on that.
I think they won 8,000 on that Calcutta, something like that.
8,000. That's what it was. Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, let's wrap this up, and let's hope this doesn't happen. But I'm just curious from a money man's perspective. What if Jason and Jed go on a dry spell, or anybody that's hunting for you and any dog? Does it cross your mind to swap dogs out for that hand? Like, all right, something's not working. Let's swap dogs. Let's see what we can do to fix this. How do you go about that? Because you got a lot of money invested in this. You need to have a return on investment.
Jason's got a dog named Nikki. That's a 3-year-old, just hunted her last Super Stakes. That when me and him made the deal, he signed the dog over to me and didn't make me pay anything. Put her in my name, and he loves that dog. And she's a gold champion. She won a cast out there in Oklahoma, that casino hunt. I think it's a $6,000, $8,000 entry, whatever it was. She won, a cast out there and put her over that gold champion mark. So she's a good little dog. And this past weekend, I let Jason make all the decisions. To be honest with you, Jason is the one that hunts the dogs. He has my 100% trust on what he says and what he does. Jason's hard to please as a dog man, though. I mean, I will say that. Jason was so rough on Jed originally and wanted me to sell him, and now if I offered him $100,000, if I told him, look, I got to offer $100,000 to buy that for somebody to buy that dog, and I sold it, he'd be heartbroken because he'd be like, that dog's worth more than that. He wouldn't take no amount of money for that dog right now because him and that dog's on the same page finally. Took a little while, but Jed is one of those dogs, and I keep telling Jason this, and I keep having to tell him this. Jed is one of those dogs. He's a true competition dog, and you know what I'm talking about. Some of those dogs, they're not the same when they pleasure hunt. They don't hustle. They're not as accurate. You know, if it's not something there that's testing them, like 3 strange dogs after being tied up at the clubhouse for an hour or two, and you take them to a new plot of woods and hunt, they know that it's not the same. They know this is just practice. They know that they may get a coon killed to them. You know, it's not the same. You know, they don't act the same. And Jed is one of those dogs to the T, or he was. Jason has kind of gotten him out of that now. Jason now says he hustles the same on practice nights with just him and Nikki, or with him and all the birds, because he's real big with all the birds, and so they hunt together a lot as well. But he's saying now that dog is not that way. He hunts the same competition as pleasure hunting. You know, pleasure hunting wise, when Josh had him, you know, he may make 5 trees. He may only have coons in 2 of those. And the next night you pleasure hunt him, he may have been 5 for 5. You know, you take him to a hunt, he's going to have just about every coon, every tree he trees is going to be a legit circle or den, or it's going to be a coon. I mean, every once in a while he'll tree a slick, but it's pretty rare. I mean, I'm going to knock on some wood because, you know, I don't want to toot his horn too much and screw him up for this weekend coming up. But he's a dog that is pretty accurate whenever the time is right. We had a entry to a 2,500 Kentucky Morgantown hunt this past weekend that didn't fill, and they ended up switching it to a 500 pro sport hunt. And Jason texted me and said, what dog you want me to bring? Because Jed's looking like crap. He said, I don't have him lined out yet. And I said, bring who you want to bring. He said, I think I'm going to bring Nikki. I said, that's fine. And the morning of the hunt, he texted me and said, now I'm confused. Now I don't know which one to bring. They both look like crap. And I said, take whichever one your gut tells you to take, Jason. I said, it's a $500 entry fee. It's not a $6,000 entry fee. I said, it's up to you. I said, she looked pretty good most of the week. I said, she earned her right. I feel like, take her if you want to take her. I'm fine either way. I said, we got a couple big ones. We got that Pro Sport truck hunt, appreciation hunt, that $100,000 Black Widow truck. I said, we got it coming up next weekend. And then, you know, 2 weekends after that, we got the $100,000 PKC hunt. I said, so he's got his chance coming. I said, so if you want to hunt her. And he hunted her. And, you know, the first drop, he texted me and said, I made the mistake. I should have brought Jed. And I'm like, you knew that from the beginning, that you weren't going to be happy with her. Jed is just a different dog. He is fast moving, quick, hustle, and she's a dog that's the same every single night. You know, she's gonna do her thing. It just doesn't make her hustle more to be in the cast.
Right.
And so Jason used to think she was a really awesome dog, and then since he started hunting Jed, he doesn't like her quite as much because he said that she's not as fast as she should be. But you know, me and my oldest daughter took Jed back to Jason and hunted with him one night this past weekend, and she treated a coon before Jed even struck. And then and then Jed treed, and he had a coon. They both had a coon, and then she treed again and had another coon before Jed even struck again. You know, so she put it on Jed that night. But Jed was laid up for 7 or 8 days. You know, most of the time that doesn't matter, but for that dog, it matters a lot.
Right.
And so he hunted Nikki and was disgusted that he did so because he just, you know, he said she wasn't the same. So I honestly, to answer your question, I leave it all up to Jason. If he tells me we need to sell a hunt, then we're going to sell it. Now that he knows the dog, you know, originally I kept trying to get him to bring Jed to a hunt. I said, Jason, just bring him to a hunt. He's going to be different at the hunt than he is, you know, on practice day. And he finally took him to one and he won, you know, and he's like, well, this dog does, you know, I'm starting to G-haul with the dog a little bit,
right.
You know. But yeah, the dog, you know, I let him make the decision on who to hunt. And to be honest with you, if he texts me about a hunt, then the answer is always yes. You know, I don't tell him no on any of them because that's how he makes a lot of his money. It's not breaking me financially to do it. I mean, Jed's already won a $20,000 Integrity Series hunt, and then that $40,000 Pro Sport hunt, that $100,000 hunt he won second in. So, you know, he's paid for himself. You know, he's earned the right to go to whatever hunts he wants to go to, in my opinion. And if he continues to win, he's owned his forever home as well. I'm not one who likes to get rid of them once they do me some good. I mean, they die at my house. They don't leave. So he's close to being there if he's not there already.
Man, I love to hear that because, whenever I had Jed for those few short weeks, I bonded with that dog. He's an easy dog to bond with. I mean, he is a very likable dog, and it makes me genuinely happy to know that, he's well taken care of. He's in the hands of somebody who's going to give him the chance he deserves, that has the money to back him, give him the showing that he needs to be seen. He is a top level hound in my opinion, and I think he's shown it. So I'm glad that, he's getting pushed and that he's found somebody who enjoys him for who he is as a dog as well.
That's right.
He's not just a tool. He's a part of the family.
If you look at his PKC winnings, I mean, to get him qualified for nationals, Jason had to go to a hunt the week before to get him to a gold champion because he wasn't even a gold champion. I paid $20,000 for the dog, and he wasn't even a gold champion. But I knew what the dog's potential was. Now you look at Pro Sport; he's like the 8th top money winning dog in Pro Sport at like $62,000. It's just the ones that he wins have been Pro Sport related, and he's been in a lot of PKC hunts.
Right,
Maynard had him in a lot of PKC hunts as well, or a lot of Pro Sport hunts as well. And he's just a dog that I don't know. He fits with Jason, honestly. And I'm glad that, and he's a 5-year-old dog. He's getting up there. He's probably going to have another 3-4 years, hopefully, of good competition left in him. Because he can do a lot of winning in that time frame. I mean, he's a dog that should be a platinum champion with no issues, and he just needs the right person behind him. And I think Jason is definitely that right person now. And Basham, Basham did really good with him as well. And I know you did good with him out at UKC. He was rolling then, and I think he's back to that point.
Yeah, that's
Took
good.
him a little while, but he's back to that point.
Yeah, that makes me happy. All right, well, I want to wrap this up with one other question that literally sparked my interest right before we started recording this podcast today. What do you think the future of these big money hunts are here, and let's say like the immediate future? There's an old saying, you can always tell when the ship is sinking because the big dogs start swimming. And within the last couple weeks, just looking at it, John Strickland had Apollo for sale, $75,000. Today, this morning, Scott Engel posts Echo for $100,000 for sale. So those are two big names, and those are two big dogs. Do they know something? As you as a money man, are you looking at anything? Does that concern you?
No, nothing. No, those dogs are, those owners and those dogs are, they did it for the right reason. Strickland, honestly, I don't know why, but I feel like he's become a female dog man. Like he only really wants to hunt female dogs now. And I know why, I guess, because a lot of the male dogs are pains in the butt, whenever it comes to breeding and females being around and, all that kind of stuff. Echo's getting up there in age. Echo's 7 years old. We drew out with Echo. I hate to draw Echo because he is a tough dog. He's a low-level strike dog, in my opinion, but when he trees, he's going to have a coon just about every single time. That night we beat him, really and truthfully, the only reason we got a chance to beat him was because him and that Spice Girl dog, Echo and the Spice Girl dog, got on a track together. Jed went off the other direction. They got on a track together, and before we even got to the tree, the guide said, then we hadn't even started walking to the dogs yet, and the guide said, that's going to be a den tree. And I was in the back with the guide. I was on that cast, and I said, well, what makes you say that? He said, I've treated that tree 100 times, and I ain't. He said, if they're in the tree, I think they're in. He said, I've treated that tree 100 times, and I've never seen a coon in that tree. He said, even when there's no leaves on that tree, he said, there's no holes to be found. He said, I've been minus on that tree before, but I know those coons are in that tree. There's a hole, there's a hidden hole. There's some way they get in that tree you just can't see. He said, but it'll be a circle tree. And we got there, and before we pulled up that tree, he said, that's the tree. I was like, okay, good. And they ended up circling the tree, the Jed tree, the coon, and he had struck for, it was a 3-dog cast. He had struck for 50 because he's a lower level, mid-level type strike dog. Echo actually struck for 100 that night, which I was surprised. That Spice Girl dog usually strikes for 100. And that was the break there that we needed. And then, Spice Girl treated a coon by herself, Echo treated a coon by themselves, and then Echo kind of fell out of hearing almost. And spots go a treat again, and was another circle tree, and Jed treat 2 more coons, so I don't honestly think that there's anything that's wrong, and that's why they're getting with these dogs. I mean, Engel had definitely Engel's a trustworthy guy. I believe everything he says. He's a good guy. There's a lot of them in that coon hunt world I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw them, but he's different. He's going to tell you like it is, and I don't feel like he's hiding anything. He said the real reason he was getting rid of that dog. He's about that mojo line, and promoting those rodeo dogs now, and that's what he's trying to spend his time with, and he doesn't want Echo to sit up and go to waste, I feel like. And somebody will buy that dog this week. I mean, that's what I told Jason. I said it'd be hard for me to think that dog would be on sale for more than 2 or 3 days. Somebody's going to buy. He's too good of a dog to somebody not to spend that money on him.
For $100,000, he's going to be gone.
I know dogs that sold for that much or more and were less dogs than him.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see.
Same thing with Apollo. I mean, Apollo sold pretty quick.
It's crazy to think what coon hunting's getting to.
It is, and it's sad, honestly, in some regards, because a lot of people that don't have the money, like, I'll be honest with you, I'm never spending $100,000 on a dog. I mean, I could do it financially. I wouldn't want to, but I could. I just don't think I could ever bring myself, knowing what I've been through. I've had 2 dogs that got killed since I've started this coon hunting stuff. Since I've started this competition coon hunting stuff in 2 years, and they both are $20,000 dogs. So I've taken some hits for sure. So it'd be hard for me to think I had a $100,000 dog and then someone died. You know?
Oh, I know.
So it'd be hard for me to spend that money, but somebody will. Because he's a good dog. He's worth it for sure. Yeah.
Well, Bronk, hey, I tell you what, man, we're closing in on an hour and a half here. I cannot thank you enough for joining me. This has been fantastic. I mean, it was informative. It was fun. This was a good time, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and join me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, and we'll do it again one day if you ever need anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll for sure have you on here because there'll be some more vet topics that come up that I'm going to need some help on, and if it can help me, it can help somebody else too. So.
That's right. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Well, thank you once again for listening to this episode of the Deep and Lonely podcast. We appreciate you guys taking time to sit down and listen to our podcast. We do this to try and teach, train, and learn, to help out. We enjoy it. It's informative. It's fun. Gives you guys some insight to the sport of competition coon hunting, and I think Bronk was a good example of that. So if you guys enjoy it, please follow us wherever we're at, whether that's our social media pages, that's going to our online store, houndsmanxp.com, checking out some merchandise. We got some hats, tumblers. Check out the new Competition Extreme Dog Box we've just launched. That is a well-built box. It's different than any other box on the market. It might not look like it from the outside, but once you guys stay tuned and check out some of these videos we're getting ready to drop on it, you will see it is built different than any other box on the market. I said, guys, once again, thank you for listening to the Houndsman XP podcast, Deep and Lonely. Bronk, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.